Into the Pit came out 2 weeks ago, and I still can't get over how good the game is. From the scares, to the visuals, to the gameplay itself, it's just fun and scary and everything I love about Five Nights at Freddy's. But a big part about this game is how many new fans it's bringing into the franchise. Either people who were turned off from the lack of scares in recent years, or brand new fans who didn't really like the traditional gameplay of FNAF, seeing this new kind of game and being interested. And from what I can see online, it seems like a lot of new and more casual FNAF fans are pretty confused as to what this game is actually saying. Even for long-standing veteran FNAF fans, the actual, minutia of what's going on is strange. Especially if you haven't read the book, since this game is based off of one of the short stories. 2 weeks ago, I made a breakdown video on the actual plot of the game that we see directly and some Easter eggs we find within. But today, I wanted to delve into the theory side of things. So this is going to be a lot more speculative, but I'll bring up evidence when it's available. Today, I'm going to delve into the true story of Into the Pit and what's actually going on. Or at least what I think is. After all, like the saying goes, it is just a theory. So slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. So in case you forgot, didn't play the game for some reason, didn't watch somebody else play it, or just want a refresher, I think it is important to do a very brief plot summary on what exactly we see happening in the game without speculation. I'll keep it quick, but skip ahead if you don't want to hear it. There's chapters down there. The game basically follows Oswald and his family, who are under some pretty severe money troubles after the mill in town closed down, the same place his father used to work. They can't move away from town because they have a grandma who lives nearby who needs help often. So in this new situation, Oswald has to spend every day of his summer at Jeff's Pizza so he's not home alone. But eventually your father is late one day picking you up and Oswald gets annoyed. So he goes to hide in the ball pit to get back at his father and make him have to come in and find him. But when he goes back into that ball pit, it transports him back in time to 1985. He's in the same building, but it's when it was a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in the past. At first, this is a dream come true. He's playing arcade games and meeting new friends, but eventually things take a turn for the worse, and he encounters this yellow rabbit creature, who leads him into the party room, showing him the 6 children that he's killed. He then tries to make Oswald the 7th. He barely escapes and manages to get back on the other side of the ball pit, meeting Jeff and his father, who then berates him for sneaking off. Jeff leaves, and before they can leave too, the yellow rabbit follows them through the ball pit, makes a grab and gets Oswald's father, dragging him inside. Oswald pulls his father back out fairly quickly, but it's already too late. He comes back changed, with his eyes glowing and not speaking. By the car ride home, Oswald knows that his father has been replaced by the yellow rabbit, and that his actual father is still somewhere in the pit. So every night, Oswald sneaks out to return to that ball pit and look for his father. Each night, he finds another child who's trapped in that 1985's Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and eventually, after freeing 5 of them, he finds his father tied up in the safe room. They both make it out of the ball pit, and Oswald manages to fight off the yellow rabbit. In the good ending, at least. It then gets itself tied up in the ropes, the two reconcile, and they go home. So, what the hell was that? What does that actually mean? Is there time travel in Five Nights at Freddy's now? Probably not, but let's break it down. The biggest debate surrounding the lore of this game is most likely what the ball pit is actually doing. Are we actually traveling through time or not? It's an important question to ask. On one hand, that's what it seems like, right? The game makes it seem like we're traveling through time. After all, we go into a ball pit and we come out at a different time period. Not to mention, the things we do in the past affect the present. In the past, the yellow rabbit knocks down and destroys these glass doors. Then in the present, they're no longer there, as if when Jeff bought the place, there was broken doors and he just removed them. We need to scare somebody in the present, so we go back into the past and capture a rat. So it does seem like we're going back into the past, but how does a ball pit allow you to do that? Well, in Five Nights at Freddy's, there's no basis or explanation for why a ball pit would allow you to travel through time. Now, that's not necessarily a point against it. New things can always be added to a story. It could just be that the ball pit is capable of doing that just because, or that there is an explanation, but we don't have the answers to it as of yet in the series. It's going to be revealed later. But in my opinion, if we have no reason or explanation for how something is happening, but we can find a different explanation that does have evidence to back it up, it makes more logical sense to go with the other explanation. If I can explain what's actually happening with this ball pit using what we already know, then we don't have to assume something we don't know about, that being actual literal time travel. So if it isn't actual literal time travel, what could this be? Well, the books give us some more information on this very ball pit. In the original short story, Into the Pit, Oswald doesn't actually go back into the past after he goes to the past several times beforehand in the story, moments that we don't actually see in-game, but once the missing child incident happens in the past, Oswald never re-enters the ball pit. This was changed to make the game, more fun to play. So the actual story of Into the Pit doesn't tell us that much more about the ball pit that we don't already know. Lucky for us though, this very same ball pit is prominently featured in the epilogues. The Fazbear Frights epilogues tell a continuous story throughout the entire series, except for the last book, which was just showing some stories that didn't officially get released. It was a whole thing. That story features Detective Larson investigating the Stitch Wraith and combating Eleanor. That was a lot of names, and they're not super important for this theory, but just so you know who I'm talking about. Detective Larson is just a human trying to do the right thing. The Stitch Wraith is a combination of Agony and two spirits in one body, but their goal as a character is to collect William Afton's Agony and destroy it. Eleanor, on the other hand, we don't have a lot of information on her origin, but she's this weird, messed up version of Circus Baby that is apparently very pretty, and she's trying to collect William Afton's Agony to amass it into herself and become more powerful. So essentially, Detective Larson protagonist, Stitch Wraith anti-hero who turns out to be good guy, Eleanor antagonist. Basic summary. In the epilogues, after Eleanor has been defeated, the Stitch Wraith, who at this point in the story has just been Jake, one of the spirits, for a while now, finds himself at the very same ball pit in the abandoned Jeff's Pizza. Drawn to it, Jake collapses his body into the ball pit, feeling himself fall deeper and deeper until he doesn't even feel physical anymore. We then cut to the memory of a spirit, Millie. Millie is the main character from the story Count the Ways, and a quick summary to that, you've actually seen this story represented in Into the Pit if you got the 3-star ending. I'll describe the story first, see if you can figure out which minigame I'm referring to. In Count the Ways, Millie is annoyed at her family's gathering and sneaks off to do anything else, and she finds a Funtime Freddy to which she goes inside of. But once inside its stomach hatch, it closes in after her, not letting her out. Suddenly, the eyes of Funtime Freddy turn inwards to face her, and then Funtime Freddy begins listing off the several incredibly detailed and graphic ways that he could kill her, giving her the choice of her death. Millie doesn't want to die, she was just depressed and very gothic and talked about death a lot. So by the end of the story, Millie picks the guillotine in the hopes that she can dodge out of the way at the last second and escape. The story ends ambiguously, but the fact that we're seeing her spirit now kind of tells us what happened. Did you figure it out? This is the minigame you play when spamming the candy machine at night 5 of Into the Pit, where you see this girl recreating Foxy Go 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 in a way, but collecting 5 items until eventually collecting Bon Bon on Funtime Freddy's arm. These items that she's collecting are interpretations of ways that she could have been killed by Funtime Freddy. For example, boiling alive. Back to the epilogues now. After Jake falls into the ball pit, we cut to Millie being lost in these snowy woods, feeling incredibly cold and incredibly tired, although it doesn't feel like she's been out there that long. She is, however, lost, until a boy comes out from the woods to grab her by the hand and help her back to her grandfather's house. And once she sees it and sees her family happily celebrating inside, she runs in and is warmly welcomed home. And for the first time in what feels like a long time, she is happy. Cutting back to the real world, one of the grubby red plastic balls in the ball pit shines golden and then eventually becomes semi-transparent with a pastiche of this memory inside. One by one, the other balls in the ball pit start doing the same, turning gold and then semi-transparent with a memory inside. Not the same one as Millie's, just a memory. Until eventually the whole ball pit is shining. The story then cuts away. The book here is saying a lot, and it's implying even more. But from these implications, I believe the book here is saying that this ball pit harbors many lost souls trapped in purgatories made of their own memory. These spirits are trapped here by agony, wandering around cold and lost and unable to find peace. But Jake's last actions as the Stitch Wraith is to reach into each one of these memories and help those spirits to rest. They may not be moving on, but if they're stuck in these memories, at least make those memories a happy one. In the FNAF books, spirits and memory are incredibly closely tied, even sometimes being used interchangeably, and Remnant and Agony have been shown to be able to affect either of them. Pause. If you haven't read the books or it's been a while, I'm throwing out a lot of terminology here. What is Remnant and Agony? The books very rarely specify information about Remnant or Agony, but lucky for us in the epilogues there are two scientists, one studying Agony and the other studying Remnant, and from them we get their perspective on what these things are. Agony is stated to be the energy of the most negative emotion a human can experience, agony. It's nearly undetectable and hard to measure, but typically when something incredibly horrible happens, a nearby object becomes infected with the agony of that event. That energy can be manipulated and used in various ways. Remnant, on the other hand, is slightly different because it's not the energy itself. Remnant is specified to be the combination of incredibly positive human emotion or spiritual energy or memory. Again, these are stated somewhat interchangeably at times, and metal. It is specifically the combination of that positive energy and metal in physical form. That is Remnant. Remnant is what William Afton was studying in the game's timeline, where it can be melted down and manipulated, and he likely did that using the scooper in Sister Location into the Fun Times. At least if the blueprints from Sister Location are to be believed. Well, we get the blueprints in FNAF 6, but they're of Sister Location. Nuance. Remnant and Agony both have various abilities that don't necessarily interact. Agony is at times able to manifest in dark tendrils and kill people in an instant. Meanwhile, Remnant has been shown to be able to heal. Even just scraping some Remnant off on someone in the hospital dramatically increases their health. But both Remnant and Agony can manipulate memory. We get clear examples of both of these things happening. You could argue what Jake does in the ball pit is Remnant, but for a more direct example, earlier in the epilogues, Jake encounters a depressed homeless man and reaches out to him. He's able to, in the homeless man's memory, find a positive, happy memory and strengthen it and make it larger in his mind. And in the real world, the man is much happier afterwards. An equal but opposite example can be seen with Agony. During the final fight between Detective Larson, the Stitch Wraith, and Eleanor tries to neutralize the detective so she can prey on the others. And to do this, she traps Detective Larson in his own mind by implanting her memories of the horrible deeds she did onto him, at this point likely using Agony. Theoretically, he'd be there for a long time if it wasn't for his own ingenuity. Within those memories, he finds ways to either escape or defeat Eleanor, and then escape that respective memory until eventually he comes back too, because when this was happening, he essentially blacked out. I think you might be able to start seeing the pieces come together here, because I think all of this is establishing a precedent. The books clearly show us that the spirits and memories of people in this franchise are trapped in this ball pit, and the books give us examples on how Agony can manipulate memories to keep people trapped within them. Even further, we have examples in the books of Remnant being used to make memories better and happier. Even further, we have examples in the book of when you're within someone else's memory, you can make changes and affect that environment to help that person escape that memory. So is this what Oswald is doing? Traveling through the memories of the missing child incident victims to help them? Possibly. But to solidify that argument, I think we would need to explain two key issues here if this is not in fact time travel. What is the Yellow Rabbit, and how does the past keep affecting the present? The Yellow Rabbit is actually a big spot of misunderstanding for a lot of casual and newer FNAF fans, and I don't blame you at all, because it can be very confusing going into this series. But this is not Springtrap, and a lot of folks understandably make that mistake, because it's a Yellow Rabbit, that's the guy. But Springtrap is specifically William Afton, dead inside of a Springlock activated Spring Bonnie suit, who has rotted and decayed over some years until eventually he, as that person, possesses and pilots the full suit. It's essentially a walking corpse. Whereas this thing, although very organic looking, has no William Afton inside it, and the suit itself is still in fairly good condition. It has not decayed yet. The game refers to it officially as the Yellow Rabbit, and this thing is barely human. It's almost closer to an animal. So if it's not Springtrap, what is the Yellow Rabbit? what do we know about it? Well, in the original story, it's definitely a physical suit at the least, and it seems to be so in the game as well. After all, the good ending sees it being hung in the netting and trapped until it eventually gives way. And even after this thing apparently dies in the ropes, it is visible and present, pulling on the ropes. Oswald, Oswald's father, and Jeff in the 2-star ending can visually see this suit, which tells me it is a physical suit. Not to mention, in the final fight, it manages to bite Oswald on the arm, and that bite remains there after it dies. If this was an illusion or a ghost or something, that bite shouldn't remain, but it does. So if it is a physical suit, what's going on here? Well, I believe that it's infected with agony. Now, this is often just speculation based on how it acts and what it's capable of, but I think the game actually gives us some really solid evidence to this theory. In the 2-star ending, when Jeff encounters the suit after it's been defeated, it has black tears streaming from its eyes. Meanwhile, in the books, whenever someone is killed with agony, they have black tears streaming down their eyes. Agony, when it manifests, often is shown as a viscous black liquid. So that evidence, paired with how the yellow rabbit acts and functions, makes for a pretty strong argument that this is an agony-infested Spring Bonnie suit. So then the question is, whose agony is infecting it? Well, I mentioned earlier that in the books there's a scientist studying the effects of agony. He learns that you can take agony from multiple sources and add it to one object. This is actually how he creates the Stitch Wraith. He lines up several objects that are less infected with agony to more infected, and he's created a machine that forces the agony from one object into another, something that it can do on its own, but he's speeding up that process until eventually all of the agony is collected into the body of the Stitch Wraith. So I think a similar thing is happening here. The books imply, and the scientist nearly directly states, that agony can be harvested, collected, amplified, and rally around a single consciousness. If this ball pit is filled with the agony of the victims of the missing child incident, that would likely coalesce into the suit that killed them. Not to mention, if all of them were killed by William Afton wearing this suit, then it would be a nearby object for their agony to infect during the event of the missing child incident. But I don't think just their agony is inside this suit. After all, it's acting a lot like William Afton. So is William Afton's agony in this suit as well? I believe so, but if that's true, am I saying that he died in the suit? Well, it doesn't appear so, at least not yet. When William Afton dies in the Springlock suit, his body is affixed to that thing. It's placed in the secret safe room that every Freddy's has and sealed away. But this suit is in generally pretty good condition, and I don't see any corpses inside of it, which leads me to believe that William Afton hasn't died in this suit, at least not yet. But if that's the case, why is William Afton's agony here? Well, truth be told, I don't have an amazing reason for that. Maybe he's just that evil. Maybe he did something else to experience agony during it. I mean, in the Silver Eyes, William suffers a Springlock incident before he dies. He has scars all over his body. So maybe that's where his agony comes from. It's not clear. But for as little of a reason as I have a lot of evidence to suggest this is the case. For one thing, it's doing the things that William did, which would make sense if William's agony is piloting the creature. I also believe the reason it appears so monstrous and organic and scary is because this is how it looked like to the children just before they were killed, a monster. Not to mention, although this thing doesn't speak that often, it does speak, and when it does, it sounds very William. It may have been hard to hear some of the lines in game, but if you go through the files, they're labeled, and you can see them right here. And this is very William. And finally, the photo that gives you the good ending in this game. It's a photo of William and Henry, and for some reason, even in the middle of combat, this photo is so important to the yellow rabbit that it stops what it's doing, looks at it, and freaks out for a moment, as if that memory triggered something deep inside of it. So that to me says it's either William or Henry, and I don't think it's Henry. We interrupt this program with the real world. I've got a pretty big announcement to make, so technically it doesn't go live until next week, but the page is up, so I want to announce it right now. A lot of you have been asking for some more, like a merchandise thing or a plushie thing for the channel, and I was speaking with some kind folks over at Makeship about like kind of what to do for that, and they came up with a pretty good idea. For those of you who don't know, the channel kind of has an unofficial mascot. That being Toast, the character that you've seen in some of my thumbnails. All of this art is by BarBADroid, by the way. They're an amazing artist. Their link is always in my description. Go follow them. But Toast has been in several thumbnails, especially a lot of the Rytoost thumbnails on the second channel, and there's a reference sheet for them and everything like that. And I've always envisioned Toast as this kind of like little bread goblin who gets into trouble. Like, they're not incredibly courageous or brave seeking out danger and adventure. They're just kind of dumb, and they wander into stuff and get into trouble. I really like this character, and I think it's about time that I officially make Toast the mascot of the channel. And because of that, that is what I'm going to be making the next plush for this channel with Makeshift. The site is live, link is right here and in the description, for making Toast into an actual plush. They'll be a little thicker so they can sit down properly. They'll have those arms and legs you see in these thumbnails, so on and so forth. The way Makeshift works, we only get to see this plush see the light of day if we have at least 200 pledges of people wanting to get the plush. So that's going to be a fight. We have 10 days to do it. It doesn't go live today again. On August 30th, on that Friday, it's my birthday, and I'm going to be doing a long as I can stream playing games that I want to play. Probably not FNAF games. I've played enough of them right now. Things like Spyro, Crash Team Racing, my favorite games, and I'll be playing those, and the whole time, that stream will be when the plushie goes live at 9:30 p.m. EST next week, August 30th. That will be the pledge date that you can go live, and essentially, to pledge that you're going to get one of the plushes, you go onto the Makeshift website, you put on a $2 deposit, and pledge that you're going to buy the plushie, essentially. And then over the course of 90 days, I'm going to work with Makeshift to make this plushie into a reality. And at the end of those 90 days, there will be another opportunity to buy one in case you weren't there for the pledge. But at the end of those 90 days, once the plushie is purchasable and pre-orderable, you'll be then charged for the remaining amount. I think Makeshift plushies are $30, but I thought this would be a really fun opportunity to launch this new official mascot of the channel. Bye! The website pledge, the pledge is next week, but like the website, you can subscribe to your email and it'll notify you when it goes live. Okay, thank you. So it makes the most sense in my eyes that this suit is infested with the agony of the missing child incident victims and controlled by the agony of William Afton. So then the question becomes, if it's just a physical suit infected with agony, how does it replace our father and make everyone else see it as human? Well, I don't think it actually does. Something to keep in mind is that the only humans we ever see enter this ball pit are Oswald and his father. Agony can do a lot of things, and it's even speculated that agony can change the appearance of someone. Eleanor does this in the books, although it is implied that the reason she's able to do that is the Remnant locket. It's never... The issue with what Remnant and Agony can do in these books is a lot of people that do these things have both Remnant and Agony. So it's hard to ascribe what does what. But even if Agony is able to change your appearance, it changes it for everybody. Eleanor looks that way for everybody. So it seems like Agony can only affect things that it has already come into contact with. Or in other words, if I am a creature infested with agony, I may be able to change my appearance, but everyone would see me in that new way. Or if I touch someone, I can make them see something, but only the person I've touched. So, into the pit, if everyone sees Oswald's father as Oswald's father, except for Oswald who sees the yellow rabbit, what seems more likely? The yellow rabbit is able to, at range, make everybody else see it as a human using agony, but for whatever reason, it makes Oswald specifically see it as the yellow rabbit? Or the thing that leaves the ball pit and drives Oswald home is Oswald's father, physically, and everyone else who has not been infected with this agony sees Oswald's father physically. But due to being exposed to the agony that him and his father have just been, Oswald sees the yellow rabbit, the real consciousness behind his father's actions. I think that second option is more likely, but if that's true, then we would probably need evidence that Oswald is seeing things that aren't really there. But does that happen in the game? So yeah, as always, we cannot trust the point of view of our main character in a FNAF game. because they might not be seeing what's actually there. If agony is affecting Oswald's vision in these moments, who's to say it's not happening elsewhere? Like when the past is affecting the present. Sure, in the past the yellow rabbit destroys these doors, and in the present they're no longer there. But is that really the case, or is this another hallucination due to Oswald's exposure to agony, just like the yellow rabbit in his home? I think it is. So we've been prepping these ingredients and mixing them together, but I think it's time to put it into the oven and see what kind of horrors rise. This, in my theory and opinion, is the true, full story of what's actually happening in Into the Pit. In 1985, 6 children were killed by William Afton wearing the Spring Bonnie suit, and for some reason after doing this, he hides the physical suit in the ball pit before fleeing the scene. When Fazbear gets there and sees this gruesome sight, they wall off the party room, pretending that as though it never happened, and try to sell the place as fast as possible. Those spirits, however, know that it happened, and they are trapped there, their agony preventing their spirits from moving on, keeping them stuck in an endless purgatory of their memory of that day, the best and worst day of their life, endlessly repeating. Looking for the cause of this, the agony attached to that physical Spring Bonnie suit seeps out and affects the rest of the ball pit, and over time the entire ball pit is infected with their agony, their pain, and their memory. Some years later, Oswald enters that ball pit and hides deep inside of it. Being surrounded by all of that spiritual energy and agony, they reach out to Oswald, and he finds himself in their memory of that day. At first, he's having a wonderful day at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, until he sees the reason they're trapped there, and he sees them dead on the ground. The horrible acts done by the yellow rabbit. He tries to escape and manages to get back out of the ball pit, but that agony doesn't want to let him go yet. It takes control of the physical suit and tries to grab for them, managing to get Oswald's father and dragging him into the pit. Oswald reaches in and pulls his father back out, but being exposed to that physical suit changed him. His father is taken over by the agony of the yellow rabbit. Oswald sees him for what he really is and knows that at least mentally, his father is still in that pit. So night after night, Oswald sneaks off back to Jeff's Pizza to go back into the ball pit and searches through the memories of those victims to look for his father, and in doing so finds the victims trapped in their own purgatories. One by one, Oswald frees the victims that are trapped in their memories, releasing their spirits and having them find peace. And each time when their agony resolves, the yellow rabbit gets just a little bit weaker. Parts of the energy manifesting this monster dissipating as each victim is laid to rest. But over time, the exposure to this agony starts affecting Oswald more and more, giving him more visceral hallucinations during the day, starting at just flashes and ending with full-blown panic attacks. But eventually, in that spiritual realm, he finds his father, and the two of them manage to get back out through the ball pit, fighting off the weakened yellow rabbit. Then, in the real world, the possessed suit makes one last-ditch attempt to get Oswald or his father, but Oswald is able to fight him back, and the suit gets tangled in the ropes as the last of its agony melts away from it, until all that's left is an empty suit hanging above the ball pit. Oswald and his father reconcile and leave that place. So that's my theory. We're not traveling through time, but instead visiting the memories of the spirits still trapped at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and helping them find peace. At least, I think there's a lot more evidence to suggest this than literal time travel. But that's my take. What do you think is actually going on in this game? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're a new FNAF fan and this video helped you, subscribing would be super cool because I do theories like this every week. Thank you. But anyway, if you want to hear what's coming up in the franchise, last week I did a full analysis video of the teaser for Secret of the Mimic, the new Steel Wool game coming out next year. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share it with #RightTart. Huge thank you to the best channel members, the Dough Risers. And until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.